and we will let Representative Anna Eskamani take the floor.
Thank you so much, Sarasota and our Progressive Caucus. It is such an honor to be here today. I apologize for my delay. We are in legislative session, so things are super hectic right now. We just got our agenda assignments for tomorrow and Thursday, and I'm sad to say that we have some really detrimental bills being heard this week, including the first anti-abortion bill being set for the agenda on Thursday. And of course, today we even had THC caps being debated for medical cannabis. And one of your own locals, Dr. Barry Gordon, was there with us, using his expertise as a cannabis doctor. And we fight with the hope that we will not only win in the chamber, but win in the state on these issues. I tell folks all the time, we can't always control how people vote in the legislature. We can control the narrative, and we can build power around that. So I'm really thrilled to join y'all today. I am no stranger to 941 and our Southwest Florida community. I see in the Zoom room a few familiar faces, including Jared and Mark and a few other folks from my Equality Florida and Planned Parenthood family. And of course, a lot of new people as well. So I think it would be best to maybe start with just some brief introduction of why I do this work and why it's so important for me to be a part of this collective movement we're building in Florida as progressives, but to also take your questions. I really want this to be a space that's collaborative. I encourage you to put questions in the chat that I can pull from, or we can do an open Q&A near the end as well. But I know we have about 40 minutes together, and I really want to use that time focused on you and what's on your mind. And so with that said, I am proud to serve District 47 in the Florida legislature. But if you asked me 10 years ago where I would be in life, let alone 20 years ago, I never even imagined I would be in a place of serving the public and fighting for issues that truly matter, as in the middle of a pandemic at that. So these are unprecedented times. And I think my life is unprecedented in the sense that I was preparing for something, but I didn't know what. And so I grew up in Orlando as the daughter of working class immigrants from Iran. My parents were actually born in two different parts of Iran, but met in Orlando, working at the same donut shop. So it really is an American love story. Who doesn't like donuts? And so my dad was really shy to tell people that he was Iranian-American. He was nervous about the potential prejudice in saying that. And so was very shy. But my mom, on the other hand, recognized my dad's accent. So she asked him where he was from. He said that he was Iranian, and the rest was history. And so they made Orlando their home. I have a twin sister, Ida Eskamani, and an older brother named Arya. And my parents did everything they could to achieve the American dream. We went to Orange County Public Schools, K through 12. My parents worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. My dad actually was a waiter, serving tables while going to the University of Central Florida, go Knights, becoming an electrical engineer on the weekdays and working as a customer service representative at Walt Disney World on the weekends. My mom had a degree from Iran she could not use, so she worked at fast food restaurants and eventually at Kmart. And that was her last job because in 2004, she passed away to cancer. And so a lot of what I do every single day is grounded in my own experiences of trauma, in navigating life as a working class kid, as a person of color, as a young woman without a mother, and wanting to build a world where we could prevent that type of trauma, where we could help to make sure that no kid loses a parent and no parent loses a kid if we can prevent it from happening. And whether that takes shape in access to healthcare, including mental health, ending gun violence, ending racial systematic barriers, doing whatever we can to make sure that we keep families together, not apart, looking at the damaging impact of the war on drugs and how that has put families into a cycle of the school to prison pipeline. Whatever it takes, I wanted to be a part of the effort to ensure that equity and intersectionality are the center of policy debates. And when I got to UCF myself as a fresh-eyed 18-year-old, I got really involved with on-campus organizing, first actually focused on environmental issues and human rights internationally, And then I met the College Democrats in 2010. And I remember the day I became a Democrat. I was actually registered, no party affiliation. My parents were both Democrats, but I didn't want to just put the D next to my name because my parents were. I really wanted to come up with that decision on my own. And I remember seeing my fellow college Democrat students on campus. We were the only two groups tabling that hot summer in 2010. It was the College Democrats and it was the Iranian Student Organization, which I was the vice president of. And watching these students register other students to vote, I just found to be incredibly inspirational. I felt that it was the epitome of what it means to care about your neighbor, of what it means to care about community. And it's what pushed me to register Democrat that summer. And since then, I became really involved in the nonprofit sector. As I mentioned earlier, I worked at Planned Parenthood for 6 years. And when I worked at Planned Parenthood, had the chance to get to know the Sarasota community and, of course, Southwest Florida as a whole. My Planned Parenthood affiliate is Southwest and Central Florida. We had 22 counties and multiple health centers from Brevard County all the way to the Gulf, down to Collier and up to Citrus was our service area. So really had the chance to get to work with folks across the state, even some of the most conservative parts of the state, focused on access to a safe and legal abortion, expanding access to contraception, and doing whatever it takes to really center policy discussions on the needs of everyday people. And that brings me to 2016, the year that I don't think any of us will ever forget. Probably it'll now take second place next to 2020. And that campaign cycle was so vitriolic and it was so divisive that I remember waking up the day after former President Trump won. I love saying former. That just feels like so good to say. When he won his race, I felt so angry and sad and just and also driven to do something about it. And I was already actively involved, but candidly, I didn't see myself as someone to actually run for office. Not a lot of winners look like me. Not a lot of people who run for office and win are young, are people of color, are women, at least not back then. And so it took me a lot of courage to say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to run for office. And like Diane said, it was a flip seat. It was a tough race. We had a major pro-business and Republican funders that spent so much money against us, 3 negative TV ads, 25 negative pieces of mail. But we kept our hearts full and our eyes clear. And we flipped this seat and we won it again in 2020 by an even larger margin. And I will say that my district did go to Joe Biden, but it wasn't the bluest of districts. And in fact, 2 precincts that voted for President Trump voted for me. And I share that because it speaks to the fact that as progressives and as Democrats, we can go beyond the party line. We can inspire support from very, very unique and contrasting neighborhoods if we stand with our values and are authentic and transparent and accessible to the people that we represent. And so that brings me to some of the issues that we have fought for and some of the issues that we will keep fighting for. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic has been just a roller coaster year. And in my office, we jump to action. I'm someone who runs towards the fire, not away from the fire. And when we saw here in Central Florida, the occupancy rates of our hotels begin to go down, we knew that something serious was happening. We knew this would be really, really bad for our unemployment rate, that I actually called the governor's office to warn them in early March, and they did not heed those warnings, leading us to a situation that has damaged the lives of millions of Floridians with a broken unemployment system, tens of thousands of deaths at the hands of poor government management of the COVID-19 pandemic. And to this day, we have provided support to over 20,000 Floridians for their unemployment claims across 64 counties, including in counties in Southwest Florida. And in fact, it was very word of mouth. If we helped one woman in Sarasota County, we started seeing a flood of unemployment needs and questions coming from Sarasota County and surrounding areas. Same thing in Duval, in the Panhandle, even in the Keys. We really became a mini DEO in trying to help as many people as possible. And I'm sad to say that even right now, a year after this pandemic, we still have a broken unemployment system. And this first week of March, our office saw 100 new claims come in of people facing issues with the unemployment system. So the work continued, which brings me to the 2021 legislative cycle, where we have filed multiple bills to hold Republicans accountable, to put Florida on the right path of economic prosperity for all. And that includes House Bill 207, which is our omnibus package to completely fix and reform the unemployment system, increasing the weekly benefit amount, increasing the amount of weeks available, creating timelines that DEO must follow to get back to claimants, putting into place accountability measures like an ombudsman to play an oversight role. We are confident that we can get some sort of unemployment changes this session, and we're doing everything we can to make that a reality. We've also filed our 100% renewable energy goals legislation as well. As was mentioned, I'm passionate about the environment. I have filed several repealers to roll back some of the pro-development laws that have been passed. And we're doing whatever we can to get Florida on track to be a leader in clean energy and to also push back against corporate influence. There are several preemptive bills filed right now that would prohibit local governments from pursuing clean energy goals. That is how influential the special interests are in the world of utility companies and natural gas and coal. And so we have to be united in pushing back against those attacks. We're seeing the same thing happen when it comes to our seaports. I'm sure you've seen legislation filed to try to impact local ordinances protecting coral reefs. Specifically in Key West, they passed a local ordinance to try to prevent some larger cruise ships from docking in their ports to protect their coral reefs. And what does the legislature do? Tries to preempt it. And that's what's happening right now. I saw in the chat a question about House Bill 1, which I'm happy to elevate. For those who don't know, House Bill 1 is the anti-protesting legislation. This is one of the governor's priorities. And I want to be clear, the governor's priorities have nothing to do with taking care of the people of Florida and everything to do with his own political agenda. This man is not only running for re-election in 2022, but he is running for president of the United States. And even today, Fox and Friends are going to be interviewing him one-on-one in his home, in the governor's mansion. He won't even get that type of access to Florida reporters, which is pretty clear that he's trying to cultivate a national audience because he wants to run for president. And as a result, we are dealing with Trumpism 2.0 in the reflection of Governor DeSantis, with his three priorities being this anti-protesting bill, an attack of social media companies for deplatforming President Trump, and then, of course, making voting less accessible. And today, policy was moved to try to eliminate drop-off boxes for vote by mail, and Senator Baxley has also filed legislation to require Floridians to sign up every election cycle for a vote by mail ballot. Which brings me to also highlighting some of our work on getting out the vote for 2022. So there's been a lot of talk about the Democratic Party and our major losses in 2020. And I have been a part of those conversations and candidly a part of the criticism of just how we keep losing because we keep missing the mark on learning from past lessons and hoping that if we do things again, it's going to be a different outcome because it's a different year. We make assumptions about Florida's demographics and the fact that there are young people here, there are more people of color, that's going to help. And the reality is that if we don't meet voters belly to belly and actually address the issues that they care about and prove that voting Democrat will make your life better, we're not going to win races. We're going to continue to see an increase of turnout, but it's not going to be enough to actually beat the opposing party in their turnout game. And talking to many Democratic colleagues and activists in 2020, it's pretty clear that not only did we miss the mark on building relationships with different communities across the state, but we also did not have the same field activity we usually do. Of course, COVID-19 impacts our ability to do that, but I will say that in my district, We still knocked on 30,000 doors. We did literature drops for most of the campaign cycle versus actually canvassing. But being in the neighborhoods, being in the streets was important. We got to talk to folks who were doing yard work or smoking a cigarette outside. We were seen in your neighborhood. And that was important to complement the field work with digital ads and phone calls and text messages. But again, we have to be in the field to have an impact. And so what we're planning, and we haven't had a chance to announce more details yet because we were just in fundraising mode for most of February. But my political committee, People Power for Florida, is committed to raising money and leveraging our organizing model to register 25,000 voters this year. That is our goal. We had a fundraising goal of raising $100,000 before legislative session started, and we did that. Unfortunately, I can't raise money right now during session. I'm prohibited from doing that. But we wanted to hit $100,000 to have the seed money to launch our infrastructure. And I'm happy to say that we are in the process of putting together our job postings and start hiring organizers to bring onto our team. And in contrast to the typical voter registration model that we see happen, we don't just see ourselves as leading on voter registration among young people, among working class people, and among people of color. We actually want to serve as a conduit to support other grassroots organizations who want to do this work by providing grants and legal compliance support so that the churches in our state who want to do voter reg can do it with resources, with their networks, with the tools to collect data so they can build power at a neighborhood level. And so our hope is not to just show up as an organization that wants to take the credit for everything or wants to kind of step into communities. We want to actually provide local grassroots organizations with the resources to do this work in a way that will be meaningful for them and their organizers and their infrastructure long term. One of my biggest criticisms of the election cycles here in Florida is that all this money comes into the state, and if the second November 3rd is over, it's gone. And we're not building long-term infrastructure. And I had a conversation with Stacey Abrams a few weeks ago to really just get her perspective on Florida and on what we should be doing. And she stressed to me too that we have to look at this as a long-term strategy. It's not a 2-year strategy. And I'm committed to looking towards, of course, doing whatever we can to try to win in 2022, but to also make gains at the very least. We have to be able to demonstrate that what we're doing is working, that we are expanding and redefining the electorate. And so I'm really looking at this as more of a 10-year strategy than a 2-year strategy. And I think that type of attitude would also keep us focused versus having to restart after every 2 years if we don't like the results that we get. This has to be a long-term strategy, and we're committed to that. And so with that said, I see a few more questions in the chat. So let me go ahead and pull up the chat on my phone. So it's a little more complicated, but I'm here. And I was going to say, would it be helpful for me to just read questions from the chat or?
Yes. And
okay,
that would be perfect.
Okay, just want to make sure. Sometimes folks like to read it to me, and I'm really flexible though. Okay, so let me go from the top. Yes, I will share my email address. That sounds great. Before I hop off, looks like something is good about Alice White, so that's exciting. Yay, Alice White! Yeah, we actually have some local elections in my district tonight too, so I'm excited to see what's happening in Central Florida. All right, so yes, we talked about. Let me finish the anti-protesting bill update. So, HB 1, the anti-protesting legislation, has actually not been heard yet in the Senate, but it has been heard in the House. It has already moved through 2 committee stops, and tomorrow is its final committee stop. It has a 5-hour committee meeting, which is pretty unheard of. But knowing how controversial the bill is and how many advocates I'm sure will be there, it'll be a 5-hour long committee meeting, I believe from around 3 o'clock to 8 o'clock. And this will be the bill's last committee stop in the Florida House. And then we wait to see if it will be agenda'd in the state Senate. I have a feeling it will be because it is one of the governor's priority bills, but it will be on the House floor before it gets on the Senate floor. Okay, so I talked about, I will go back to voter registration. Let me see what other policy questions there are here. Now that the Republicans in the legislature are presenting themselves as the fixers of the broken employment system they produced in the first place, number one, your reaction to the Republican bills pending, and two, our way forward to keep the bill moving for unemployed Floridians. Yeah, that's a really great question. So first of all, we can't let them get away with that, right? Like they created this broken system in the first place, and we need to hold them accountable to that. At the same time, there are many Republicans who campaigned on fixing the unemployment system, and we also want to hold them accountable to what they said they were going to do. And at the end of the day, Floridians need us to find solutions, right? They need us to make sure that we're not just speaking platitudes, we actually are delivering some meaningful improvements. The bills that Republicans have filed have overwhelmingly been focused on pointing the blame at Deloitte, the contractor that built this unemployment system under Governor Rick Scott, now Senator Rick Scott. And I have been doing whatever I can to make clear that it was Republicans who passed this 2011 bill that broke the system in the first place. It was a Republican governor that allowed a company to build a website without testing it. I'm not sure if folks saw the Inspector General report that came out, of course, on a Friday that highlighted how this process of Deloitte building the system for Connect, the dashboard that Floridians use to get their claims, was not even tested to meet the contractual requirement of 200,000 consecutive users. In fact, it was recorded as only being able to meet 4,000 people on the website at the same time. And so no wonder the website could not handle the bulk from the pandemic. It couldn't even handle 5,000 people. And so making sure that we don't just allow the Republican caucus to pivot blame to the vendor, but really hold them accountable to the fact that there was no oversight on this. Not only did you craft policy that kept benefits locked to a very low amount, $275 a week, but you also allowed this contractor, multiple contractors, to build out a website that was never tested to work. And the governor ignored multiple reports from the Inspector General highlighting issues and never addressing them. So we're making those points clear in the process. I encourage everyone to do the same. Now, when it comes to improvements, though, I want to see improvements. I mean, the latest report is saying that it's going to take $200 million to fix the unemployment system. And I want us to see that money be spent. But at the same time, what I don't want to see is the unemployment system improve, but benefits stay stagnant. We need to make sure that the weekly benefit amount is increased to at least the national average, which is around $420 compared to where it is today at $275. And there is one Republican in the Senate who has filed a bill to increase weekly benefit amount by $100. That's all we've seen so far by the Republican legislature on actually increasing benefits. And so if you're wondering for how you can help, that's a great question. First of all, I think contacting your Republican lawmakers and asking them to play a leadership role in increasing the weekly benefit amount and allowing for there to be more accountability of DEO, sharing your personal stories, navigating this broken system. I think you have to make sure your voice is heard and to ensure that they are actually hearing from constituents that this is important and this is a priority. And when it comes to elevating awareness that Republicans are a part of the problem, I think that takes shape in, of course, writing letters to the editor, op-eds. I've been encouraging all of our Democratic clubs and caucuses across the state to try to get creative with using digital platforms to workshop these issues with a public audience and to even use topics like unemployment, for example, as an opportunity to invite more everyday people into your meeting. So, for example, our team has done workshops on eviction diversion, on domestic violence prevention, on bankruptcy, on foreclosures, because these are all topics that in my district people are thinking about and worried about or trying to learn more about. So we've been hosting these public-facing events using the same organizing tactics for Get Out the Vote. But instead of getting out the vote, we're recruiting new faces to attend these events so that we try to build power collectively and also prove to our district that we care about you And I think as Democrats, we could use those same strategies to host events centered on these issues that people care about, use it as a recruitment tool for new people to come into the space and help demonstrate to them that if you get involved with the Democratic Party, you'll be in good hands, right? Like we're gonna take care of you in all parts of your life. So I think trying to find ways to elevate the accountability would be super, super important. Let me see some other questions coming in. Okay. Let me see. Yep. So we see Senate Bill 48. So how can we stop? Oh my gosh, so many good questions. I'm gonna read a few and try to answer them collectively because I know we're running out of time. So let me see. Are groups such as the ACLU Florida getting ready to file suit against the anti-protest bill and voter suppression bills? Luis, I think that's a great question. I'm not sure of their litigation plans. I will say that it's highly likely that there will be lawsuits filed, not just by the ACLU, but also probably the Southern Poverty Law Center and many other organizations on the ground pursuing transparency and constitutional values. So I'm sure that will happen. Of course, the concern is that the Florida State Supreme Court is very conservative now, just like the U.S. Supreme Court. And so any lawsuit that is filed is going to go through a new collection of justices that are very conservative. One reason why you did not see a lawsuit on the latest anti-abortion bill from last session was because of fear that a more conservative Supreme Court would not rule in the favor of abortion rights. And so that is a very real fear that advocates have. And any path of litigation has to be done methodically and thoughtfully to what would be the potential outcomes if the decision was not successful. To that point, there is also the opportunity to file in federal court. The Rights Restoration Battle, Amendment 4, was filed in two separate courts, and we've already seen the more conservative court rule against advocates for rights restoration. Meanwhile, the federal court, though a much slower process, has definitely been more intentional on protecting constitutional rights and protecting the will of the voters. And so I think that also will be part of the determination process with these bills is should cases be filed in a federal court or a state court. And so let me see, are you open to support a petition to the Public Service Commission to improve solar energy regulations? Absolutely. For those who don't know, the Public Service Commission is called the PSC, and they are very heavily influenced by utility companies and often yield to what utility companies tell them to do, which is why I'm really proud to not take any money from utility companies. I take no money from fossil fuel companies. I take no money from Big Sugar. I take no money from payday loans, private prisons, banks, and actually our political committee that raised money for voter reg. We took no money from corporations in that effort. So we're very proud of our ability to challenge corporate interests versus appease them. And I have spoken to the PSC before and would be very happy to do that again. And so, yeah, that's a really great question. And I'll grab one more question, and then I want to just kind of make sure I'm good on time. But I saw a question around John Oliver's unemployment bit. If you haven't watched that yet, I definitely encourage you to do that. John Oliver did a segment on the unemployment system and talked about Florida. So I definitely encourage you to watch that. And then how did growing up in an Iranian-American household influence your politics? I love this question. So I shared a video yesterday on my Twitter account for International Women's Day, and it was 3 Iranian women in a subway in Iran with their headscarves off, and they were reading basically like a protest anthem, if you will, in Farsi. And it was so powerful. And for me, as a reminder of the resilience and strength of Iranian women who have to navigate so many cultural barriers, but more so political barriers, because Iran is a very secular country, but there are conservative values just like in our country. But the problem really is the politics, is the government enforcement that requires women to have to wear headscarves even if they don't want to. That really sets a standard that women are lesser than men, and have created gender disparities, despite the fact that in Iran, at this point, there are more educated women who have college degrees compared to their male counterparts. So things have changed so much in Iran, but yet the government has not evolved to reflect those changes, like many parts of the world, right? And so growing up as an Iranian-American household, my mom would always talk about how she wanted to go back to Iran to see her sisters, but the politics were so dangerous that she never had the chance to do it. She was worried that she might get stuck in Iran, or her sisters might be at risk if she went back as an American. And so I always think about how politics divided my family across oceans. And so growing up with that type of mentality helped me develop my own manifesta to not want to be the creator of chaos, but to be the protector of peace as a human and also as now a public official. And I will tell you that when my mom passed away in 2004, I'm a firm believer that death ends a life, but not a relationship. And I really wanted to get to know my mom even after her life passed. So I started reading literature about Iranian women, written by Iranian women. And again, that resilience, that courage, that vulnerability of those stories really helped me build my own manifesta, my own sense of being and empathy and commitment to women's equity. My foundation as an advocate is women's issues. Absolutely. That is where I first began to understand that the struggles that I faced as a young woman and a woman of color were not isolated. They were in fact connected to a much larger systemic problems. And it's what led so many women in the 60s to come together and to talk about workplace harassment and inequities within politics and government. And it's what's led to the third wave feminists in the 90s for people like now the late and great RBG to pave the way for our rights. And so that absolutely is ingrained in me as an Iranian-American, knowing the struggles that women in Iran continue to face, yet they still persevere, is what gives me a lot of strength and courage to do the same here. And so with that, I want to make sure I'm being respectful of time. And so I'm happy to keep going, Deanna, but I wanted to see if
by all means, keep going.
Okay, good. I wanted to be sensitive because I know it's a late night. So let me see what other questions have come in. So voter registration, can you build on Andrew Gillum's efforts? That's exactly the plan. But I want to mention two things. One is that I don't think in a state like Florida, one person is going to solve all of our challenges. Like I really do think that we have to be collective in building power. And though Stacey Abrams, rightly so, gets a lot of the flowers for the work that she did in Georgia, she wasn't the only one that was on the ground doing this work. So I'm very humble about the fact that we're doing this voter registration effort. And I'm also sensitive to the fact that multiple groups have already done this work for a long time. Obviously, there needs to be revisions in how they're doing it because we're not hitting the mark on actually changing the electorate. But also add that there are several other lawmakers and activists who I know are putting together their plans to do similar work in specific communities. I'm a firm believer that you have to build a multi-class, multi-race, and multi-generational coalition to win. And I think that's where we contrast a lot with others, because we got to focus on every type of voter. We can't just assume that if you're a young person or if you're a person of color or if you're a woman, that you're going to vote Democrat, and we don't really have to give you a lot of attention. We just have to make sure you register to vote. And maybe you get a few pieces of mail at your door and you're going to be set. Like that has been the model of organizing for decades in Florida. And it's often driven by consultants that make money, whether we win or lose. And we're not building power because that type of transactional, let me just throw money at the problem, is actually not building relationships, right? And so we're challenging that. We want to build relationships with voters. I look at my district, District 47 had a 5% greater voter turnout than the rest of Orange County. And that wasn't just because we like hoped and prayed he would vote. That's because we hustled. And so we hustled talking to every type of person. I have been in the fanciest of living rooms talking to Republican constituents about the speeders on their lake impacting their quality of life. And I have driven to the other side of my district to the hotel lobby where families are homeless looking for ways to pay their rent so they have a roof over their head in a motel. So being able to meet folks belly to belly at every part of their lives, at every moment, is so critical to our success as Democrats. We can't just gravitate towards the hot button topics or only talk about social issues. Those pocketbook issues are so freaking important. And we don't talk about it enough, which is why I've been really proud to be a leader on tax policy, which was not by choice, by the way. I was thrown into Ways and Means, one of the biggest committees in Florida legislature, my first 2 years, because they assumed I would suck at it because I have no tax background. I'm not an attorney, I'm not an accountant, but I took that challenge seriously and I dived deep into tax policy, calling out corporations, making very clear points on Florida's regressive tax structure. And now I'm the ranking member of Ways and Means.
Wow.
And so we got to be aggressive on economic issues along with fighting for the social issues. And so our vision with our PC, like I said earlier, is not only cutting checks to grassroots organizations to help them build their capacity long term and to build those relationships long term. But we also hope to teach our organizing model of transformational politics to others. And we're going to be hosting statewide trainings through digital platforms, pre-recorded and recorded. We're going to be doing our own organizing boot camps. We really want to make sure that folks have these tools to do this work in their own neighborhoods. You don't have to get permission from us. We want to give you the tools to go do it. And to, of course, keep track of that data so we can also demonstrate that there's results in what we're doing. And I saw a question too about, are we going to look for just Democratic voters, that kind of stuff. So again, I think it's really important that we don't just focus on that D next to someone's name. I mean, the reality is that more and more voters have become no party affiliation because they don't feel connected to either party. And that's on us. That's on us of not demonstrating to people that it's worth being a Democrat. And being a Democrat means we care about every person, that we care about the health and well-being and the freedom of every person. I think there are some American values that as Democrats, we don't do a good enough job of reflecting. For example, we talk a lot about equality, but not enough about freedom. Now, I would argue that freedom and equality are the same damn thing. You cannot be free unless you are equal. But the average voter might not know that, right? So when we talk about equality, folks just kind of roll their eyes back or they don't really connect with it. We talk about freedom. That is an American value that everyone cares about, everyone cherishes. Economic freedom or freedom from mass incarceration. Like we could use those same values to address the issues that we care about while inspiring even Republicans to support us. And I mentioned my district. We don't win in my district unless Democrats, NPAs, and Republicans are voting for me. That's the bottom line. We need everyone. We need a collection of every type of voter to turn out for Anna Eskamani, or we're not going to get it, right? And so that's our vision, is to kind of teach folks that theory of change, and to build relationships with folks that are different than you, and inspire them to come out for you as a result of it. And so let me see some other questions coming in. Okay, I saw a question about Nestle. I love this question. How was Nestle able to come into our state, take free water from a natural spring, and sell our own water to us? Boom, boom, boom. What a great question. There are so many terrible words I want to use to describe Nestle, but I'm not going to do that right now because we are in a mature adult space. But I just want you to know that there are only two lawmakers that have actually spoken up against this, myself and Representative Joy Goff Marcel, who is a neighboring district for me. And just to give some quick background, for those who don't know, Nestle water company has been granted a permit from the Swanee Water Management District. So this is all the way in like Lake City, so it's more North Florida, to pump water out of Ginny Springs, upwards of 1 million gallons a day, which they will bottle up and sell around the world. What they pay is unknown, because it wasn't Nestle that applied for the permit. It is a private land owning company where the water sits under. And this is called Seven Springs Water Company. So they own the land where Nestle will pump. They only have to pay about $150 permitting fee to the state of Florida to get permission to do this. And then Nestle pays them an unknown number to pump water from their land. It's absurd. It's absurd that water, which is a public necessity, a public good, is being pumped out of our state for private enterprise, and we don't even see the financial cost of that. Now, they're able to do this because there's nothing in Florida law to stop them. There has been incredible organizing from Springs advocates, Santa Fe River advocates, so many folks who have called out Nestle for this. But unfortunately, the Swanee Water Management Board did approve the transaction after months of back and forth and months of fighting. They proved it on protests, which is not really a meaningful thing. They're basically just trying not to take the blame for it, but essentially Nestle won. And there are bills filed this session to put requirements on payments per gallon of what you pump. So there are bills filed to basically try to put a cost to our water. And I think that would be an incredible step in the right direction to help prevent something like this from happening again. But of course, for the time being, I think we should continue to protest Nestle and, impact their brands. All of these big companies, they care about their brand so much. I can't tell you, here in Tallahassee, how many commercials there are for Nestle, like on the television or on the radio. You'll hear ads from some of these biggest companies talking about their charitable giving. I mean, it's all intentional. They run these ads to try to keep their brand positive while they do these terrible things that most folks don't even know. And so it's really important that we're clear and aggressive on holding these companies accountable to their actions, because they don't want Americans to know what they're doing in Ginny Springs, right? So we have to make sure that we're holding them accountable. They realize that their actions have consequences, and we're not going to let them get away with it. Just like with the sugar industry, I'm in Orlando. I get so many ads for Florida crystals. I mean, it's the funniest thing. I feel like they intentionally targeted me because I've been critical of sugar. So I'm getting these like Florida crystal ads, and I get them on Instagram. It's so funny. But again, like they really do value their brands. And so when you challenge and name the companies and build pressure around that, they're much more likely to do something about it. So just something that I push myself to do, because it can be very it can be stressful to go after corporations, because once you do that, either you're going to be the only one doing it as elected official, or you have a target on your back, or both. And I have been proud to do it because I'm not elected to go along to get along. I'm elected to be a happy warrior for my district and for the people of Florida. But that's not the case for a lot of my colleagues. So I do feel really passionate about being publicly direct about these concerns, and I'm really grateful that you are all doing the same.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And let's see, are there any other questions that you glanced at that you want to address?
So I'll take the last one from Peter. It's a really
Okay.
good question. How can we make sure that the Florida Commission on Human Relations will not ignore the Bostock v. Clinton County ruling? So this is about LGBTQ plus equality in the state of Florida. You might have seen a few weeks ago, Equality Florida announced some really big news that Florida, thanks to the Joe Biden administration, elections have consequences. And so thanks to the Joe Biden administration and their interpretation of this Supreme Court decision, they are expanding the definitions of workplace harassment, of public accommodations, to the point where the Florida Commission on Human Relations, which is essentially our state agency focused on discrimination, they are now embracing this broad definition of the Supreme Court decision to prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity, essentially reflecting what have been the goals of the Competitive Workforce Act, or CWA, which, if you are an advocate for LGBTQ plus issues in Florida, you know about the Competitive Workforce Act, because Equality Florida has been leading on this bill for over a decade. And so because of this new definition of the Supreme Court decision, because of the Human Rights Commission here in Florida agreeing with it, we don't even have CWA filed this year because there's no reason to file it. We have the protections that we've been fighting for. But this question brings up a good point. How do we actually make sure that's going to be long term? We have a conservative governor. Couldn't he try to overturn it, or try to push the commission to do something else? What if we have a new president? I mean, these are all like very valid concerns. And when I talked to Equality Florida about it, I said the same thing. And so I want to be clear that Equality Florida is not done yet. And they are looking towards mimicking something like the Equality Act in Florida. So instead of just the CWA, which was focused on workplace and public accommodations, actually looking at the issues of equity and freedom at a much larger scale, to reflect the provisions of the Equality Act. And so it would not just be LGBTQ plus focused, it would be gender focused. It would include racial dynamics. So those conversations are happening right now to pursue a more holistic equity piece of legislation in the future in Florida. In the meantime, I think we have politics on our side with this issue. I think it would be very politically dangerous for the governor, whether he's running for president or running for re-election, to attack LGBTQ rights right now. I see everyone going after, unfortunately, attacking trans rights. We have seen already some incredibly transphobic bills passed. Agendaed in the legislature. Hopefully they will not pass, because we'll fight to prevent that from happening. But when it comes specific to things like marriage equality, or workplace discrimination for LGBTQ plus people, that doesn't seem to be the legislature's focus. It definitely doesn't seem to be the governor's focus. So candidly, I do think politics are on our side. There are also some supportive members on the commission right now that agree to this interpretation and want to keep it that way. But I do think we need a long-term solution here. So trust me, I am not content. I'm not content on this. I want to see something more explicit in statute. But for the time being, there was a concern that if we still filed CWA and our opponents filed a lawsuit against the interpretation by the Commission of Human Rights, that they would look towards the bill file to say, well, even the equality advocates agree that this isn't good enough because they still filed a bill this year. So not filing a bill was actually in the best interest of a potential legal battle in case there is a lawsuit challenging this interpretation.
Well, Anna, thank you so very much for this comprehensive legislative update. And also, we're very excited, including the president or the chair of our local party, Joanne DeVries. She already knows about your people power for Florida. And she says, I'm just waiting for the details. And we're going to
I love that. We literally had a call with my team yesterday going over our first needs. We're going to be bringing on an attorney to provide compliance support. We're going to be posting the job openings. So please stay tuned. we have a lot going on that we're going to be accomplishing while I'm in session, since we can't fundraise during session. And then, we'll be able to launch, I would say, hopefully within 3 to 4 weeks, if not less. So we'll definitely keep folks posted, and proud to do this work and proud to do it with you. And I put my email in the chat as well. So please keep in touch. And if anything at all comes up, you let us know. We got your back. We'll be fighting for you here in Tallahassee, fighting for you in the streets, and fighting wrong alongside you for progress in Florida. So thank you again, Deanna, for the sweet invitation, and to everyone that's here tonight.